Hello and welcome to the This Is Scotland podcast Q&A with me, Ally, and my good pal.
Hello, Coinneach. How are you, Ally? Good to see you.
Oh, great. Yeah, we've got all sorts of great questions in, as always.
Got loads of great questions. They're absolutely amazing. I feel like we should just crack on.
Yeah, exactly.
They're so good. So I've got a question, and I think definitely you're the man to answer this one. From Heather in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. She's given us a question. If you could persuade Historic Environment Scotland to bring one Scottish ruin back to life, which one would it be? What a brilliant question.
Thanks for the question, Heather. And she is in luck because I've just been reading the latest annual edition of Scottish Castle Association's magazine newsletter. So I'm right switched on to bringing ruins back to life. So Stirling Castle was properly brought back to life. I don't know if you've been there, Coinneach, but the Great Hall there.
I love Stirling Castle.
Oh, but right up on the hill, as you drive down the motorway, even you see this great yellow Great Hall sat up on the hill, and you go there, it's got this amazing hammer beam roof. Well, that is a reconstruction, because when the British Army abandoned the place in, I think, the 60s, 70s, they left that cheaply subdivided into a barracks. Stirling's Great Hall was just a sleeping chamber and some cheap offices. And so the decision was made to rip all that out and put on that new hammer beam timber roof and paint the whole thing that yellow. It's called King's Gold, that kind of luxurious finish. And it looks phenomenal. It was controversial because people said, well, the British Army's occupation of Stirling Castle is one of its layers of history. And by removing it, you delete hundreds of years of history. But they made that decision. They took it back there. It is now a centerpiece for visitors, but also you can hire it out. It's a place for concerts and events. And it's like, I think that's what these places should be used for. They should be living buildings that you can come and interact with. When Stirling was getting that done to it, they were going to do the same to Linlithgow Palace. They were going to cover huge chunks of it over, bring it right back up to kind of habitable spec almost, and use it as a kind of high-class rental venue and a community centre. I think that would have been amazing because Linlithgow has got a great community around about it. They've got this thing where school children get taught to be little guides or wee guides or something they're called. So they come in and give visitors guided tours. And in 2012, they basically did do up Linlithgow Palace. Chanel took over the palace to do a fashion show called Métiers d'Art. With people like Karl Lagerfeld and everything. And you can still see on Chanel's YouTube how they set the whole thing up and how they did the catwalk. So in the middle, if you're not aware, it's like a four-sided palace with an open courtyard in the middle and an amazing stone fountain built in the 1500s. So what Chanel did was build out kind of wooden awnings that covered about half the courtyard. So the catwalk was in a square, and they catwalked around the edges of the courtyard with the fountain in the middle. They had big burning braziers, and it looks amazing. It was snowing during the catwalk, so it really is the most iconic. And I think Linlithgow Palace should live like that. It deserves to live like that. And we know that the community round about would inhabit that building in the same way Stirling's really well used. So of all the places, I think I'd go for Linlithgow Palace. Also, I used to work there.
Okay.
I love it.
Is there any kind of really ruined ones, maybe some that hardly are even there anymore, that you visit, that you think, goodness, imagine seeing that building again, the way it was, whatever, 500,000, 2,000 years ago?
So one of the very oldest ones, I suppose, is this place called Duffus Castle. It's sort of 3-4 miles north of Elgin, and it used to sit in what's called the Lake of Moray, like the low-lying marshland. So it sits on a little man-made hill, and it's got a stone keep on top. But it was built by the first Normans that were invited in back in the, I want to say, 1100s. And it was built as a timber castle on this man-made artificial mound. And it was in this wetland, so overviewed this huge flat area, and it was the arrival of the Normans into the north to subdue the Gaels in that area.
We do need subdued quite a lot, to be fair.
I know. Actually, your jumper's not very subdued this morning, I must say. And but they rebuilt it as a stone tower and it partially collapsed down. And I just think that the illustrations showing how it was, it looks cracking, like a proper great big courtyard, great hall, the best views over Moray, which is an underrated part of Scotland. And so I suppose if you're going right from scratch and rebuilding that, I would happily inhabit it as Laird of Moray. What about yourself? Have you got a particular favourite that you'd like to see?
It's a good question, actually. I mean, probably the physical structure of what in Gaelic we call dún or a broch in English. I think I just find them so fascinating. And the fact they were kind of half stone, half wood, what they were used for, where they were, some on land, some at sea, well, in lochs. I think they're the most fascinating structures, and I know there's a lot of work being done just now in Caithness on brochs, so that would probably be mine.
That's a good shout.
I just find the whole thing fascinating, that there's so many, not far from me just now on Kerala, Gaelic Castle, these castles that some still have structure to them. But obviously there's no grand castle inside anymore. And I just imagine some of these things coming to life would be very special. Yeah.
I think while we're going to shout, so Caithness Broch Project are raising funds to build a new broch, which is similar to what we were talking about. And also the Cranag Centre on Loch Tay. Not a castle, obviously, but it's like an old wooden loch-based house or building, which they are in the process of rebuilding, and it is brilliant. So those are two great things to give a shout out to.
Yeah,
Can I ask
good
you a
question, Heather. I love that.
Can I ask you a question?
Go on. Yeah.
Right, so I've got one from Alistair from Campbelltown. It's incorrectly spelled Alistair. He's gone Alasdair. It's not the worst spelling of Alistair, but certainly not the best. And Ali from Campbelltown is asking, I've always loved the island names Egg, Rum and Muck. They sound like they belong in a children's story, but I'm guessing there's some story behind them. How did they get their names?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you are right. You could imagine a children's novel set on these islands, but they're great names, and really none of them are what they seem. For those who don't know where they are, they're part of the Small Isles, which is an archipelago in the Inner Hebrides. So if you can picture there, south of Skye and north of, what would you say, Mull and the kind of Ardnamurchan Peninsula. And even though they're called the Small Isles, they're not that small, actually. Rum is the 15th largest island in Scotland. So, they're some of them are a pretty decent size. And actually, even though they're called the Small Isles in English, the Gaelic name probably makes a little bit more sense. They're called Na Helen and Tarshin. And Tarshin is kind of like the Cross Isles. And that's obviously the crossing from maybe Uist to Morar, but these days you would get the ferry from Malig. So we've you mentioned there Rum, Egg and Muck, and they're the most famous because they have the coolest names. But there is a fourth small isle as well, which is Canna. And Canna is the most westerly of the small isles. It's now owned by the National Trust for Scotland, and it was left to them by two amazing people, John Lorne Campbell and Margaret Fay Shaw. Probably names many of our listeners will know, particularly Margaret Fay Shaw. She was a Scottish-American. She was an ethnomusicologist, a photographer, a folklorist, and she's probably best known for kind of going throughout the Hebrides, collecting the music and folklore of the islands. And now it's just reopened quite recently, Canna House, owned by the National Trust, and you can go and visit Canna House and see everything that you've done. Definitely worth a trip to Canna. But the question, okay, let's start with the Isle of Egg. Nothing to do with chickens at all. It's probably out of all of them the easiest to explain why it's called egg. So it comes from the Gaelic ige, or probably originally the Old Norse, which means of Ig, which is the kind of island of the notch. And for those who have seen the island, it's this Ig is a very dramatic shape. The Enscourt, the kind of pitchstone ridge that really gives it this very iconic skyline. So that's where Ig comes from. Although, again, of course, like everything in the Western Isles, there is different names for it as well. Probably my favourite name for the island of Ig was Ellen Nambaun Mora, the island of the big women. And this, if you look, harsh, but it's about giants. That area was well known for its giants, and particularly women giants. And there is, in the Annals of Ulster, which is kind of the history of medieval Ireland from kind of 890 or so, there was a great line. It says, the sea threw up a woman in Scotland. She was 195 feet in height. Her hair was 17 feet long. The fingers of her hand were 7 feet long, and her nose was 7 feet as well. And they said she was as white as a swan. And so that area was very famous for its giantesses. So yes, you can call it Ig, or if you get in the ferry, you can call it the Isle of the Big Woman. Instead. So that's Ig. Muck is probably my favourite story, though. So it's nothing to do with the soil. But in Gaelic, again, it's a Gaelic word, it's Élan nam Much. Now, many people sort of misread this because Much is the Gaelic for a pig. So you would think, it's the island of the pigs. And actually, remember the book, James Boswell book, The Journal of the Tour of the Hebrides. He absolutely heard this, and he talked about it in his book as Sow's Island. So thinking again, it was about pigs, but it's not, because there's an extra wonderful Gaelic layer in here. There is an animal in Gaelic, the Muc Vara, the sea pig, and that is the Gaelic for a whale, or whales and dolphins and porpoises. So, which would have been very prevalent. So when people went to Muck, they would have seen all these amazing animals in the sea. And so it is not pigs from the land, but pigs from the sea it is named after. So I completely love that. And actually, in Boswell's time, there was a laird of Muck, and he wasn't particularly happy about his title. Not the most glamorous title, hello, I'm the Laird of Muck. And so he used to tell people, no, people misrepresented it. It was the Isle of Monks. He wanted to give it a kind of religious turn. That was not the case at all. He was really just trying to be fancy.
Could I thrill you briefly, Coinneach?
Go on, yeah.
Your porpoise, the word porpoise.
Sure.
That comes from the French for fish pig.
There we go. So isn't that wonderful when languages connect us? I think that's fantastic. So Muck is the Isle of sea pigs, basically.
Massive wifeys and sea pigs.
Exactly. Rum is probably maybe the most mysterious. It's a little bit harder to decipher where this name came from. For those of you who don't know too much about rum, it's a big island, probably most famous for its very mountainous area. Many of you will know the Cuillins of Skye. But rum, there's the Cuillins of rum as well, that highest being Ashgaval. So it's a very mountainous island.
Yeah, it's really striking when you're sailing past it on the ferry.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Rum, again, it's Gaelic, comes from room. And I mean, there's a lot of theories, but it's really about space or width or a ridge of some kind, so that's kind of really where that comes from. It's really as simple as that. But actually, the owner for, I would say, most of the kind of 20th century, the 1900s, between Sir George Bulloch and his son John. They didn't like the connotations to the alcohol, so they actually changed the spelling of rum to RHUM. That was just their own decision to do that.
So embarrassing.
The son was also the man who built the very extravagant Kinloch Castle on the island of Rum as well. But in 1991, they changed the name officially back to Rum, RUM. So for a wee while it was RHUM, but that was again just made up. There was no connotation. Just they didn't like a Morgan Spice rum of an evening, and so call it that. So I think, three amazing names of three wonderful islands. But as I said, don't forget Cana as well, because that is also a beautiful island in the small isles. But they're really special, those islands.
Lovely. Yeah, so I've sailed up and down past them, of course, plenty of times, but I've never actually set foot. So I'll make that a mission. And
absolutely added to your to-do list.
And I'll thrill people with the sea pig chat.
You're listening to This Is Scotland. We'll be right back.
Ali, quick question.
Uh-oh.
You're stranded on a Scottish island for a week. What three things are you bringing?
I mean, it depends on the island, but I suppose, first of all, like, if you're on an island, you want to make the most of it with some good reading material. So I'm bringing the Scots magazine. If I'm on an island, there's a decent chance that there's a distillery nearby, so I'll get a good whiskey for there. And it's never as hot as I want it to be on Scotland's islands, so I'm bringing a cosy jumper.
Good answer.
I reckon. Because Scotland always has another story to tell. There's hidden history, amazing people, island life, food, travel, culture.
And for almost 3 centuries, the Scots magazine has been bringing those stories to readers everywhere.
So wherever you are,
keep Scotland close.
Subscribe today at scotsmagazine.com
and enjoy Scotland's stories every month.
Hey, you want to ask me one now?
Yeah, I got an amazing question all the way from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello, Charlotte, one of my favorite places in the US. Claire says, I'm planning my first trip to Scotland, and every guidebook seems to recommend visiting a graveyard. So she says, this is not what I would normally do on holiday. Why the obsession? And what's your favourite Scottish graveyard to visit?
So this is a funny one, because it is that thing of course you go and visit a graveyard. Like, I visited them all the time. They're great places to hang about in. Like, we used to, like, as kids, you'd kind of play in graveyards and things, and you forget that different cultures have different ways of dealing with the dead. And like, but asking a Scottish person, why would you hang about in a graveyard, is like asking a fish why you'd be in the water. Like, it's just a great place to be. So I suppose, Claire, thank you for your question. I think, I suppose it would start with the fact that from a historical perspective, if you wanted to go and explore like different periods of time, graveyards have very often been safe spaces that haven't been developed. So you can have layers and layers and layers of history going back to way before the 1400s and find ancient stones right the way up to recent burials. And you see every generation leaves different kind of cultural markers, different fashions of gravestone, different stories, and you can basically they're a portal to the deeper past. You know, like the city centre of Dundee, for example, that's all been knocked down and rebuilt, and so a lot of the history gets lost. Whereas the graveyards are sort of sacrosanct spaces. So you can, like I say, the oldest graves, you know, out in, say, Lismore, you have these amazing graves at the modern graveyard where they're carved with the effigies of knights on them. And these are men in full suits of armour holding swords across their chest. And they're real named knights and sort of clan warriors from maybe the 1400s, sometimes even earlier. And you can go and interact in that same sacred space that they would have understood as sacred. And in the same space, you can go and find graves from the 1700s, 1800s, and again, you can start to match those to records. And I think the grave matched with the record, matched with sharing the physical environment that these people shared, helps a connection across time. There are tons of favourite Scottish graveyards to visit. Like, I'm not even going to start trying to tell you all our favourite Scottish graveyards to visit, because I'm sure Coinneach's got a pile as well. But recently, I was in this place called Nig, which is in the Tarbet Peninsula. It's just off the North Coast 500. It's on the east coast. It kind of sticks out into the sea, and it's like shaped like a sort of hammerhead with a little narrow bit connecting into the land. And at the southern point of that, this little village called Nig has a very old graveyard with a big carved Pictish stone. It's about 8 foot high. It's got a great big cross on one side, and then lots of kind of Pictish Celtic carvings across it. It's an amazing thing in itself. So in the graveyard, where the Nig stone is within the church itself, within the graveyard is a little sign saying this is the cholera stone. So cholera outbreaks were really common, and they'd wipe out huge numbers of people, but there was no understanding of how like cholera was passed one to the other. I think it's from dirty water, bacteria in water and that kind of thing. But they understood it was from floating miasmas, basically bad air that float around infecting people. So one of the members of the Kirk session in Nig saw what he thought was like a yellow gassy cloud above the graveyard, and he thought, that's cholera, that's a cloud of cholera. So he got a big sheet, ran out, threw the sheet over the yellow gassy cloud, and then kind of wrapped it all up, capturing the miasmas, dug a hole, buried it, and stuck a stone on top, thinking he thought saving the parish from the outbreak of cholera. So I think that graveyard is a perfect example where you have a Pictish stone from maybe the 9th century, so really ancient. Christianity is just newly arrived in Scotland. Then you have this kind of 18th century, 19th century panic over cholera that you can learn about how people understood the world and understood illness and health and how they would combat that. And then you also have this beautiful setting where it's kind of in woodland. It's an ancient old building. It's down by a river. So it's just a stunning place to be. So I'd say favourite Scottish graveyards, there are too many to name, but I think that's a cracker.
It is a cracker. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, if you have any particular, like, is there anything, like when you think of favourite graveyards, like I've got even more I could go on, but I'd love to ask you, like, where do you think of?
Well, from an island graveyard, I think St. Clement's Church in Rodal on the Isle of Harris, for me, is probably the most fascinating. The church itself was built by Alatha Crothach MacLeod. He was the 8th chief of the clan MacLeod, so that was around kind of 1520 or so. And of course, their main home was on the island of Skye. So Harris for them was their playground. They would go hunting, shooting and fishing. Probably the people from Lewis, they were doing that too. But also they got buried there as well. And the church has just the most fascinating grave slabs, the MacLeod tomb, and just the setting itself in Rodal is really, really special. So I think that one, although we're pretty lucky on the islands, we position our graveyards pretty well, because obviously our stone is so hard to get through. We mostly have to bury graveyards on the coast, so we get some really nice views. I'm from the wee village of Cremore on the Isle of Lewis, and we look onto the village of Crossebost across the water, and they say that people from the village of Cremore only go to Crossebost once, and that's to get buried. That's where our closest graveyard is. And I want to keep up that I'm determined not to go to the village of Crossebost until I need to. And I hope that's a wee while. I hope we get a few podcasts done before that happens.
Well, there you go. That's the question of where do you get buried. I think that's great. Just to say, if you are, so Claire in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you are thinking about your tour and you're not quite sure which graveyards to prioritise, that one in Rodal sounds absolutely amazing. There is also the quite famous, the Fortingal Yew. The oldest living thing in Europe is not actually Coinneach, it's a tree in Fortingal in Perthshire, which is, the tree is, I think it's in the region of 8,000 years old. And it's in an ancient old graveyard. Across the road is kind of a field clearance cairn marking like a mass grave as well. But it's in this stunning location. And it's also where potentially the man that killed Jesus Christ came from. So the chat is, I know. So Pontius Pilate was born to like a soldier in the Roman army, and one of the places he was stationed was a Roman marching camp at Fortingal. And so there's a historically reasonable chance that Pontius Pilate was Fae Perthshire. And so he would have looked upon the Fortingal yew when it was already 6,000 years old by the time he saw it. And then 2,000 years later, we're saying the same thing. And I've always thought, Ewan McGregor is Fae quite near there. And surely we're crying out for him to do the biopic of Pontius Pilate, but for big Pontius' perspective.
I'm for it. I'm ready. I've got my ticket.
Yeah, so and also a final graveyard that I'm always into is down the Canongate Kirkyard on the Royal Mile. It's got a brilliant grave in it to a poet I love called Robert Ferguson, who died in poverty with mental health problems at 24. Rabbie Burns loved him. I said he was my elder brother in misfortune and by far my elder brother in the muse. And so he came to visit and found that there was no grave to him. So Rabbie Burns wrote a poem and got a small gravestone made up to mark the grave because he thought it was a sin that there was no grave over such a great poet. But then that was wearing down, and Robert Louis Stevenson, author of Treasure Island, came upon it, and he funded a much bigger stone with Rabbie Burns's poem on it. So you got this kind of the treble Rabbie of Robert Ferguson, Robert Burns, then Robert Louis Stevenson, all contributing to commemorate writing in Edinburgh. So yeah, there's jewels in every single one of them. So crack on, Claire. Go and explore.
I love that. Yeah, lots to explore for sure.
Let me ask you something. I know we're running out of time. Let me ask you something. What have we got here? How about... taking us across to Halifax in Canada. This is from Sophie. If you were making the ultimate This Is Scotland Spotify playlist, what songs have to be on it?
Oh my goodness. Could this be the best question ever? Have you got 5 hours? I don't know. But to choose kind of music from Scotland were an absolute dream. But what I sort of took inspiration from for this one was that amazing Radio 4 show, Desert Island Discs. You're allowed to take 8 discs to an island, and that's the only 8 songs you can play for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I actually went through to find some Scottish people who have been on that show to see what Scottish songs they chose for their final 8 songs for the desert island. David Tennant, the actor, Doctor Who, he had Dignity by Deacon Blue on his good tune. Annie Lennox from Eurythmics and her own solo class, she had the band The Blue Nile, a song, A Walk Across the Rooftops. Mm-hmm. Judy Murray, Andy Murray's mum, she had an absolute rocket of a song, Shang-a-Lang by the Bay City Rollers. Not too sure if I would want that to be in my final 8 or not. Billy Connolly chose the Sky Boat song by the regimental band and the massed pipes of the Scots Guards.
That stinks. Billy Connolly, that stinks. If I don't know if I get a veto. If I get a veto on this playlist, there's a couple here that aren't getting in, and I'm afraid we're not hearing the Sky Boat song by a math pipe. Oh, no way.
It was quite an eclectic playlist. Definitely listen to that one. Even Val McDermott, the wonderful crime writer, she chose Kenneth McKellar, a cracking song you might enjoy, Ali. It's called The Road and the Miles to Dundee.
Oh, that's a tune, though. To be fair,
yeah, that is a
my grandad
tune.
used to sing that. That's a good one. I'll allow it.
So I didn't choose any of those songs for the start of our podcast, Ali. But I think there's some classics that I hope you will agree with, but I know this will be something that we can chat about lots more. But firstly, if I'm away from home on this desert island, I think Caledonia by Dougie MacLean is the perfect introduction. It's about being homesick. He wrote it when he was busking in Brittany, in France. He wrote it and then realized how homesick he was and went home the next day. That's how homesick he was when he was in Brittany in his early 20s. So absolutely Caledonia should be there.
Yeah, for sure.
I adore Eddie Reader's rendition of Auld Lang Syne.
Yes.
And if I was stuck in a desert island, I would still have to have Hogmanay, every year. I wouldn't know when Hogmanay was, after a few years, but I would still absolutely sing that at the bells of Hogmanay. And then I was thinking, I'll need to get my steps in. I've got to keep fit on this island.
Yeah.
So to get my 10,000 steps, I was thinking, maybe the Proclaimers, 500 miles would be a good option to stomp around my desert island. What do you think of that one?
I think that song has genuinely, because we've sung it so much and it's become almost cliche, I think folk have lost track of what banger that actually is. The lyrics are really nicely put together. The harmonies are great. It's actually a well-constructed, good tune. It's not just it's not just one to go, da, da. There's something in there. There's something really good in the actual lyric writing there.
Yeah, absolutely. The amazing twin brothers, Craig and Charlie Reid, wrote that one. It was a balance because I nearly chose that other song, Letter from America. Again, an amazing, iconic song. So either of those I'd be happy with. Then, do you know what? At the weekend, we've got some friends here, and their kids were here, and we were watching the Disney movie Lady and the Tramp.
Right.
And actually, I got one of my choices from that unexpectedly. One of the wee dogs in it is called Jock, which is Scottish Terrier, and as he is hiding his bone in the backyard, he sings
in the backyard.
In the backyard. You did well there. He sings the tune of the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, but he says in his bonny bank of the backyard as he's digging his wee hole. So obviously the Runrig version, it has to be because that's iconic. So that would be in there. I've got to have some Gaelic, of course, Ali. You would expect me to have some Gaelic in there. And for me, I think there's just one person that just brings heart and soul to Gaelic music, and that's Julie Fowlis. There's a beautiful song from North Youth, Smeorach Clondal, the Mavis, or the song thrush of Clondonald. So I would have that, or Capricalis Felavata. Either of those. So definitely a Gaelic song. Then my absolute hero, of course, is Callum Kennedy. He wrote a song, Lovely Stornoway. And I think if I'm anywhere, I would want to be singing this. There's a great verse. And no matter where you are, hitch your wagon to a star. Heaven can't be very far from lovely Stornoway, which I just think is fabulous. So definitely that. And I was just thinking of my last two. I was worried that if somebody arrived on the island, maybe I should have something cool, as if I actually am trendy and cool. So I thought maybe a contemporary Scottish band, the Churches, who I absolutely love. So I've chosen The Mother We Share from the Churches, just in case anybody comes for a dram on my desert island. But the moment they leave, I'm putting literally a banger on the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest from Lulu, Boom Bang a Bang. So that will be.
I would steer pretty well clear of your desert island. If I was passing in a kayak with a spare seat and I heard they tunes blasting, I'm like, Ken, what? I'll just paddle on by. I'll paddle on by.
I am devastated to hear this.
A lot of those are rock solid bangers. Like, you can't beat the Proclaimers, you can't beat Caledonia is a miraculous piece of songwriting, and the way it feels to listen today, especially like me and you, we do spend time out of Scotland, a fair amount of time out of Scotland.
Absolutely.
And it does hit home. Can I chuck on a couple?
Oh, I'd love you to.
I feel like a couple of Scots tunes. Like, I feel if I was on a desert island, genuinely when I'm hill walking or when I'm on for a long cycle, I'll be singing away to myself quite a lot. And one of the ones I always sing is this spooky old medieval Scots song, the Twa Corbies. Really eerie. It's just a conversation between two crows about what they should do for dinner. And one of them says, "I found the corpse of a newly killed knight. Let's go eat his eyes and use his hair to build a nest." And I have a great version of that. There's loads of great versions, but the Old Blind Dogs do a great version. So if you want to hear the Twa Corbies, get that on the Old Blind Dogs Spotify. And I also think that I'd want some beautiful fiddle tunes. I think we have such an amazing fiddle tradition in this country. So I'd maybe want like Laura McCall, her album Har, just beautiful fiddle work, or Duncan Chisholm.
love Duncan.
He writes these big, like kind of really considered whole albums that are like about Skye, for example, or he's got one about, I think it's Sandwood Bay up in Sutherland, and these are rich experiential albums where I think I could get them on, close my eyes, and just be away from the desert island and in Sandwood or in medieval Scotland, piking out the bonny blue een of a slain knight.
I don't think there'll be another playlist in the world that has Duncan Chisholm and Boom Bang a Bang on the same playlist, but I think we have to make that happen. So if you're up for it, listeners, we'll put together a This Is Scotland playlist for you, and that will be great for one of the road trips you have around Scotland for sure.
Drop us a line about what should feature on there, because a lot of Coinneach ideas need replaced. So get your ideas to us.
You are You are not replacing Lovely Stornoway by Callum Kennedy. That is for sure.
Okay. Right. Shall we call it a day?
Absolutely. Well, great questions. And we've got lots more, but please keep sending in your questions. It's so easy to do so. Either on Instagram, you can message and follow at This Is Scotland Pod, or just message myself, Hebridean Baker, or
historic_Ally.
Great. So we'll be back for our next episode at the start of next week. Great to hang out, Ally, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.